they're like, Jesus! And Jesus doesn't even talk to any of the disciples. He walks right over to Thomas, and he deals with Thomas. He goes, here, put your hands in my hand. Put your side in my side. Put your hand in my side. And the disciples probably wide-eyed, jaws hidden for, and then Thomas discovers this. Discovers Jesus. That the resurrection is true. And his life is forever changed. Jesus gives Thomas exactly what he needs. Not what he wants, but what he needs. Thomas needed no more proof. In our doubts, when we ask God our questions, we will find discoveries. We will. You may not like the discoveries that you find. I'll be completely honest with you. Because in our discoveries, we have to change, don't we? We have to, when we learn something new about God's character, and that forms our life, guess what? That sometimes needs to be chipped out of a portion of our life, needs to be chipped away, so that we can be conformed to Christ. We will have new discoveries about Christ. We will have new discoveries about ourselves. We will have new discoveries about our situations. And Jesus is saying, as you're seeking and doubting and questioning and seeking Him, Jesus is saying in those discoveries, do not disbelieve, but believe. Jesus is never uncomfortable with our questions. He welcomes them. Jesus is comfortable with our questions. Lastly, on the road of belief, God reveals Himself. God will reveal Himself in your life. You seek Him, you have your questions, you seek Him, He will reveal Himself. I love what Thomas says. My Lord and my God. That's a statement of faith. That is the first time a disciple had that strong of a statement of faith. And we read Scripture. And it's one of the most strongest statements of belief of Jesus Christ made by a disciple. And it's made by doubting Thomas? It doesn't sound like a doubt to me. He wanted to know for sure. Doubts will lead to questions. It's okay to have the doubts. It's okay to have the questions. Will lead to my Lord and my God. That's that statement of faith. See, we need to remember when Jesus came, He was concerned about Thomas and wanted to strengthen him. He didn't want to rebuke him. Jesus knew what was going on. Jesus knew Thomas wasn't there the times that he showed up. This is a week after the resurrection. Jesus knew. And he was very well aware what was going through Thomas's heart and in his life. And Jesus wanted to strengthen him and encourage him. Because God wanted to use him. And He desires the same thing for every single one of us. Is to use us in a mighty way. Our doubts will lead to questions, which will lead to God revealing Himself to us. Jesus is always comfortable with our questions. This account is one of the last times that we see Thomas. You have to dig a little bit deeper. But after this, Thomas was committed to sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. He was wholeheartedly committed to sharing this good news about the resurrection of Jesus. He was all in. What happens with Thomas is he goes to ancient Babylon, which is modern day Iraq. And what he does is he shares this good news. He's making disciples. He's starting churches. And then from there, he picks up and he goes to Persia, which is modern day Iran. And he's preaching the good news, making disciples, and planting churches. And from there, he goes to India. And of all the disciples, he was the furthest one away from Jerusalem, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, making disciples, planting churches because of what Jesus has done in his life. He was committed wholeheartedly to this message and the mission that God has for him. And in 72 AD, he gets thrown into a pit. And he gets stabbed with a spear for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. We don't read that in Scripture. We just read, oh, doubting Thomas. He was fully committed to sharing this good news with others. So what does that have to do with us? What can we take away from this? What are some next steps that we can take? First is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've said it throughout this sermon. Your questions will lead to a deeper faith and a more solid relationship with Jesus Christ. I welcome questions. I'm not saying I have all the answers. If I don't know, I will try my hardest to find an answer to your question. Use the blue communication card. Write the question down, put your email, make sure I have contact information, send it to me. Some people, grab me real quickly and ask a question as they're leaving. That's okay. I welcome questions. I may not have all the answers. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, try to shoot from the hip. I don't do that. I won't. But it's okay to bring your questions. If you do not ask your questions, resentment may set in. And resentment will lead to a hard heart that doesn't seek God.